All right. We do not have absolutely all of our speakers from this morning because of conflicting obligations, but we do have Reverend Beth Miller, Admiral Steinman, Professor Silvers, and Margaret O'Connor. Some questions. Oh, and Kathy. Some questions were identified directly for specific speakers. I'll go through them first. I think we can finish all. We need to finish right at 12:10, for we have other things to do then. So, an opening question to the Reverend Beth Miller. Do you feel that the military has been diligent in its chaplain training regarding the provision of a ministry that focuses on interfaith dialogue? How does the military chaplain serve the large segment of military personnel who are not grounded in any particular faith, but experience the profound spiritual distress of combat?
That's a two-parter, so I'll go in both parts. Regarding how the military is doing at training their chaplains, I can't answer for sure because I don't know. I'm not on that side of things. I can say that I visited both the Army and the Navy schools for chaplains over the last couple years and talked with their head folks, and I know that it is their goal. They struggle with it. They have a continuum of response and ability to be responsive to that mandate of being able to minister in an interfaith fashion among those who are in training for chaplaincy, from those who have a very strong evangelical conviction that it is their call from God to evangelize, and you can understand that's their conviction, and they're being asked to do something that is counter to that, which is to put that in check, so to speak, and to minister to whoever comes to them from where they are rather than trying to take them to a different place. From that spectrum to the far other end, us and some of the other more liberal and theologically diverse chaplain trainees who more comfortably and more naturally understand and take that in and can work out of that. Both of the leaders of those schools told me that they very much appreciate our chaplains because it's part of their training as ministers in our faith tradition to be able to do that, so it's a good fit that way. The second part of the question had to do with ministering to those of no particular faith who are experiencing the spiritual difficulties, stresses of military service. Well, pastoral care is given. How do they do that? They are present, first of all. They're a presence, a listening, welcoming, opening presence. And pastoral care is given a lot by simply listening and asking intriguing questions that help a person to move on their own, not to take them to a particular place or tell them what they need to do or think in order to find solace, but to help move them toward what is a source of solace for them. And then, do that kind of exploratory. I think the first step of pastoral care is always some sort of an assessment, a spiritual assessment with the individual to see where they are and then figure out how to minister to that individual from that point of view. So that would be my answer to that.
We have two questions relating to Don't Ask, Don't Tell for Admiral Steinman. First, will the Universal Code of Military Justice, Article 125, have to be rewritten before Don't Ask, Don't Tell can be abolished?
For those who don't know, Article 125 deals with sodomy and defines sodomy basically as any sexual behavior other than vaginal intercourse. And the short answer is no. The practical answer is yes. Eventually, Article 125 will have to be repealed. But Article 125 exists right now for heterosexuals and homosexuals, and basically it prohibits oral sex for everybody, but obviously that's routinely ignored and it's seldom prosecuted. So even if you were repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell and left Article 125 for later discussion, you could simply deal with gays under Article 125 as you do currently with heterosexuals under 125. basically it never gets prosecuted unless it comes up as an ancillary charge on something else. That's basically what happens. Correct me if I'm wrong, any JAG officers in the audience. Ultimately, the answer is yes, it will have to be. Otherwise, you have a situation where gays are in the military, but they're violating UCMJ article, as are currently heterosexuals.
A second question that refers to Don't Ask, Don't Tell is a little longer, so I will just read it. The political issue of Don't Ask, Don't Tell has nothing to do with the Pentagon or the military, as several speakers indicated, and the questioner agrees with that proposition. Then questioner goes on to say, why should Harvard not recognize ROTC regardless of the politics of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell? And then secondly, to be consistent, should Harvard also recognize the Harvard Catholic Club or similar groups of Orthodox Jews, Protestants, or Muslims because they have different cultural or moral values than some of the more vocal left wing of the Harvard faculty?
Whoa. I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer the second part of that question.
It had Don't Ask, Don't Tell, so I gave it to you.
Although I will say I would strongly support Harvard recognizing ROTC as a 25-year military man. I think it's only appropriate, and I think that's part of what this conference is about. The first part of the question dealt with the politics of it. And let me say this. The questioner is correct that because Don't Ask, Don't Tell is a law that Congress enacted in 1993, it cannot be done away with by executive order of the President or the Commander-in-Chief. So the law either has to be repealed by Congress or overturned in the courts. The latter is there's a couple cases in front of the courts now, and it's probably not likely to happen. So it has to be repealed basically by Congress. So that makes it a political issue. However, I have long advocated that Congress will take its cues from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Joint Chiefs are the military experts for Congress, for this country. So what the Joint Chiefs recommend to Congress is probably what's going to happen. I sincerely doubt that if the Joint Chiefs today expressed any hesitancy for repealing the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that you would get, even in a Democratic-controlled Senate and House, a majority of voters repealing the Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I don't think you get conservative Democrats voting for repeal, and I certainly don't think you're going to get conservative Republicans voting for repeal if the Joint Chiefs don't say, it's okay, we'll make it work, we've got the leadership in the military to make it work, there are gays serving now and it's not a problem, it's not a big deal, you can go ahead and repeal it and it's not going to hurt the military. I think the Joint Chiefs have to say something along those lines in their testimony to Congress, either openly or behind closed doors, in order for the law to be repealed.
Question for Margaret. Margaret, how many students, non-military students, are active, if you are aware of this, in Allies? And is there any data on the effects of the program that you're aware of so far?
That's an excellent question. At Tufts, I would say we have about 20 to 25 students who participate regularly in our weekly meetings and other programming, and probably an additional 15 to 20 students who attend events from time to time and are on our e-list. I can't speak to the numbers at the academies. I just don't know. They usually send about 4 representatives to our conferences, but that's definitely only a small representation of their participation at their institutions. And as of now, we don't have any data on the effectiveness of the program in terms of its impact on larger society, but as an institution, we do have an annual review process for our programming, like the Joint Research Project, where we critique it and continually try and make it better so that it can continue in the future and be of value to the students involved.
Thank you. We have more general questions now, so I would ask Professor Silver if he would respond to this. Questioner says, can we break the standoff between those who want to ban openly gay people from all parts of the military and those who want to allow them in all parts of the military? Can we break this standoff by changing the law to give the Pentagon the authority to open up units deemed ready based on their privacy infrastructure?
I'm really not the person, I think, to address this, perhaps.
All right.
I'd be happy to address that. I think that proposal will not work in the military. You can't have a segregated military. People in the military are constantly changing units, commands change, individuals change. So you can't have a commanding officer at his or her whim say, okay, gays can serve in my unit, and then make it okay, and then that person leaves, and somebody who is not in favor of gays serving comes into the command and kicks out the people who happen to reveal that they were gay. Similarly, I don't think you can have certain job descriptions say gays can serve here and gays not. For example, sometimes it's been suggested that combat jobs would be prohibited to gays in the same way that women can't serve on submarines and women can't serve in special forces. The problem with that is that gays are already serving, some of them openly, in combat units right now and on submarines. I have spoken to at least a dozen submariners who have told me that everybody on the boat knows they're gay, which presumably means the command knows they're gay too, because no secrets on a submarine. The very first American casualty in the Iraq War was a gay Marine, Staff Sergeant Eric Alva. When they went into battle on the first day of war, his buddies, his fellow Marines, knew he was gay. Unfortunately for him, he stepped on a landmine, he had his leg blown off, and his Purple Heart was personally presented to him by the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps at Walter Reed. So I personally know a Navy SEAL who is gay, told me that his members of his SEAL team knew he was gay. I mean, there's lots of examples like this. So I don't think you can even come up with a segregated proposal that would fly, particularly since, as I indicated in my talk earlier, gays are serving now more or less openly in many units, and it's not a big deal.
The next question I would just ask generally and see who would like to respond. Makes the following statement. Barring a fundamental change in the overall civil-military relationship in the all-volunteer era, an Ivy League ROTC program would arguably be poorly attended due to socioeconomic reasons, if nothing else. This is not a good return on investment for the military in strictly recruitment efficiency terms. Therefore, should the military put the ROTC into the Ivy League schools at cost, if you will, in order to cultivate the greater cultural good? How do you build the business model for that kind of commitment, given all the pressures on the Defense Department budget?
Right. Well, I tried to address this in the 12-minute frame, but much too in passing. It's very easy as a civilian on the Upper West Side of New York to say yes. The government, speaking generically, has a real investment in, as I put it, I'm sure, too portentously, in binding up of the nation's cultural wounds from the 60s, which linger on in attenuated form, and even in inherited form, as we've heard. And however, as I also mentioned, the model of ROTC in small schools like Ivy League schools that flourished between the end of the Second World War and the dramas of the late 60s, early 70s, cannot return for many reasons, and one of them is precisely this, that the numbers will not be there. Some of those numbers, as I indicated, were clearly due to the old American tradition of a draft-induced volunteering. Some of the numbers in that period reflected a choice on the part of students to serve as officers for a longer period of time than as enlisted men in the ranks for a shorter period of time, and some of it had to do with a sense of a patriotic obligation, and the two are not incompatible, of course, far from it. Today, all this is true. At Columbia, we have the vision, the dream, perhaps, of restoring an ROTC unit to our campus, which would clearly have to draw on students from other campuses a subway ride away. And that is good. It is good that they no longer be exclusivistic or exclusive Ivy League units. I think that's terrific at the micro level. It gets away from this awful word elitism, which is one of the words I'd like to shoot down in the American vocabulary, or elitist. Elite is a good word, but those two words, in my opinion, are bad words. And I think that the necessary mixing of ROTC units from, among institutions necessary to bring them up into the necessary scale is a positive contribution in these terms.
Thank you. We have one final question, and we're really right at the edge of our time. So let me read the question, and anyone can respond. The questioner says, the current ROTC model is by some measures antiquated, a relic of another era. Little discussion has taken place on broad changes that might be made to the structure or function to update the needs of ROTC, I take it, for the 21st century and meet the desires of the Academy. If you were king for a day, what changes would you make to ROTC?
Well, I'm not sure I'm able to address that articulately. I mean, my activism, to draw on the American vocabulary on this question, is largely driven by my sense of citizenship and feeling for the importance of a redefined civil-military relationship, of which clearly an important symbolic as well as substantive aspect would be the remarriage, so to speak, of the Ivy League with our military. I'm far less concerned with the nuts and bolts. I leave that to others who deal in detail on these matters. I can only observe that the availability at Ivy League schools of courses and studies in history, international relationship, not least languages, including many non-Western languages, is a precious asset. I think it's quite important. Look, my memory at Columbia of NROTC is that it was very segregated, culturally, socially. The people who did NROTC hung out together. I suddenly have a flash image of a dramatic moment in '68. We had a little uprising in '68, in which I was in the middle of it, and at one moment I thought I would die when a phalanx of anti-riot students were headed toward an occupied building, while a number of us had interposed our frail professorial flesh between this advancing phalanx and the students inside. And I had many thoughts, because I thought it was the end, so you have many thoughts at that time. And one of them was that I had many students, a graduate and an undergraduate, behind me in the occupied building. And as I looked and saw the troops advancing, I didn't recognize one of my students among them. That must change.
Thank you. I again want to thank our panel members and thank you for your questions as we bring this session to a close, and then when we acknowledge them, there is one final announcement. Thank you.